Here's a question of critical reasoning from the official GMAT textbook. I'd like you to pause the video and read it. Take as much time as you think you need. Once you're done that, press play. Resume watching the video, Now take a look at these options. There are 5 in all, and you've got to pick one as the answer to the question you've just read. Again, pause the video, deliberate over each of these, and pick what you think is an appropriate answer. Press play after you've selected an option. Okay, let's take a look at the argument in detail. Let's break it down. According to the argument, a year ago, Diet Foods launched a year-long advertising campaign for its canned tuna. Last year, it sold 12 million cans of tuna compared to the 10 million it sold the previous year. The extra 2 million that it sold was because of new customers that the ad campaign brought in. Now, profits from the additional sales of those 2 million cans, however, were substantially less than the cost of the advertising campaign. So, on the basis of these details, the argument comes to the conclusion that the ad campaign did nothing to further the company's economic interests. A quick tip here. Sometimes the argument hands you the conclusion on a platter. Here's how. Take a look at it. Words such as clearly and therefore herald the coming of a conclusion after them. They sort of indicate or signal to you that, hey, a conclusion is about to arrive. And clearly you can see that in the argument itself. Also notice that the question asks you to weaken the argument, which means you have to weaken the conclusion. Which in turn means that you have to, broadly speaking, prove the very opposite of the conclusion. And how do you do that? Well, you pick an option among the 5 that, together with the information in the argument, helps you weaken the conclusion. That is, helps you prove the very opposite of the conclusion. In the case of this question, the conclusion is that the campaign did nothing to further the company's economic interests. Now, we have to weaken this argument, so we have got to prove just the very opposite of this conclusion. And that is, we have got to prove that the campaign did something to further Diet's economic interests. Now, let's take a look at each option to see how they may or may not help us in our endeavor to find an answer to this question. Alright, let's take a look first at option A. This option talks about how big a part the tuna can sales play in the overall profits of the company. And this option states that it plays a very small part. Fair enough, but keep in mind what we have to prove, that the campaign did something to further Diet's economic interest. So, with this in mind, ask yourself, does the option talk about the campaign directly or indirectly? Well, no, it doesn't. Does it talk about any business benefits for Diet's Foods from the ad campaign? Well, no, it doesn't. Does it help to prove that the campaign worked for the economic interests of the company, the high cost of the ad campaign notwithstanding? Well, as you can see in the option, there's no information about that, so no again. Well, then in that case, this is not the option that will help us weaken the argument. Let's take a look at option B then. From the argument, we know that Diet's Foods sold an extra 2 million cans of tuna as compared to the previous year because of new customers that the campaign brought in. Now, what option B does is that it gives you a bit of information about the demographic of these new customers. It says that most of these new customers were Diet's Food loyalists. Well and good, really. But ask yourself, does it talk about any business-related benefits to Diet's Foods because of the campaign? No, it doesn't. Does it provide any information that you can use to prove that despite the high cost of the campaign vis-a-vis the profits, the ad campaign did bat for the economic interests of the company? Well, no. Nothing in that option provides you any information that you can use to prove that. In fact, it makes you wonder whether the ad campaign was necessary at all. After all, if they were loyal customers, there's a good chance that they would have considered buying the canned tuna any which way, which in turn makes the need of the advertising campaign, at least it makes it seem that the need of an advertising campaign was rather unnecessary. So all said and done, this option doesn't help us prove that the ad campaign did something for the company. Well, let's move on to option C. Now, from the information that we have from the argument, we know that this was the cost of the campaign, a campaign that brought in new customers who made it possible for Dietz Food to sell an additional 2 million cans of tuna last year. Option C says that a less expensive advertising campaign would have brought in noticeably fewer customers. Okay, but would those fewer customers have led to Dietz Food selling a significantly lesser number of cans? Well, not necessarily. And here's why. A store with, say, 30 bags of chips on its shelves can just as easily be emptied out because of 30 customers as it can be because of 20 customers. So a lesser number of customers doesn't necessarily translate to a dip in sales. You can sell just as much as or even more than what you would have sold with your customer base intact. How much customers will buy of a product, we want to know for certain until and unless they buy for real. Now, this option talks about fewer customers being brought in because of a less expensive campaign. Alright, but how much would those customers purchase is not given. They could have purchased more or less. And since how much they would have purchased is not given, it doesn't help us weaken the argument. So let's take a look at what option D has to say. If a company has made money on sales, that means it has made profits from those sales. And yes, Dietz Foods has. We know it sold 12 million cans of tuna last year because of new customers that the campaign brought in, and it did make a profit. The argument itself says so. And then it goes on to add that the profit was less than the cost of the campaign, because of which the argument reasons the ad campaign did nothing to help the economic interests of the company. Now, as you can see, this piece of information offers nothing to help us weaken the argument. That is, it doesn't help us prove that the campaign did bad for the economic interest of the company. So, well, this is not the option that we can consider, which leaves us with option E. So now let's see whether option E does make sense at all, right? If I were to depict what option E says in the form of a graph, this is what it would look like. The graph provides you with what's known as a generic picture of the state of the canned tuna industry. It shows that the sales of canned tuna experienced a sharp downturn in the last 5 years. Now, in such a bleak business environment, Dietz Foods was able to sell 12 million cans last year, 2 million more than the previous year, because of the new customers who were brought in by the ad campaign. So notice that though the canned tuna industry was going belly up in the last 5 years, which means sales were declining sharply in the last 2 years as well, Dietz Foods managed to increase its sales during that period. Thanks to the ad campaign, it was able to buck the industry trend and sell more when everyone else was selling less. So you see, this bit of information that option E provides, when added to the information we have from the argument, helps us weaken the argument. That is, it helps us prove that the ad campaign did something to further the economic interest of Dietz Foods. So, well, we have a winner. It's option E. Option E is the one that decisively helps us prove that the ad campaign did bad for Dietz' economic interests. Never mind the fact that its cost exceeded the profits. Because with the campaign, the company managed to increase its sales in an environment that saw the economic interest of the canned tuna industry suffer and witness a downturn. So the information that option E provides is the most suitable and most feasible to help us weaken the argument that is provided in this particular question.